All right, so we're getting into the second day of measures of center, which is lesson 10.3. The focus in the book is on mean and median. However, we're also going to review mode and range, because those are things you need to know for sixth grade as well as your standardized test, but definitely going into seventh grade. And you also need to be able to do it for things that are coming up, such as box plots. So just a quick review on finding the mean. That's the average, right? So the average is finding the total value and dividing by how many are there. So we took this data set of temperatures, we added them all together to get 288. We divided by the 6, and that gave us a total of 48. So we knew that our average temperature was 48 degrees, or our mean for the data set was 48 degrees. So with mean meaning average, then our other term of finding the center of data is the median. And once again, the median, like this image is trying to show you, is the center grass area of two different highways. So the median is going to be the middle of our data. Now we're going to see that there are two different types of medians that we have to find. Either we can eliminate when there's an odd group of data pieces, and I just find the middle number. But sometimes I end up with an even set of data pieces, and I have to do some extra math in order to do those. But I also want to review a couple of things that we learned in fifth grade, which is mode and range. And mode, once again, starts with MO, just like the word most. So it's going to be the number or the image in that first example that pops up the most often. Sometimes there's no mode at all. And then range will be to find the distance from the smallest to the biggest. So notice that in the median, the mode, and the range, we have to set up our data each and every time in the order from least to greatest. That's going to be vital in order to do these correctly. So as we get into these examples, then make sure that we follow that first step. We're going to put in our information from least to greatest. So in this example, they have them already listed for us in least to greatest, so that makes the idea of finding the median much easier. So really what I do is I cross off one at the beginning to the far left, one at the end to the far right until I get to the middle. If it's an odd set of data, then I know that I have one middle number left. And if it's an even, then I got to do some math to figure out what the median is going to be. So when I cross each of those out from left to right, left to right, left to right, then I see that I have one number left in the middle of my data set. So easy enough, my median is simply 10. When I think about my other pieces of data, though, my MMMR that I want to find, what is the one that's there the most? What would the mode be? Well, as I'm looking at that data set, I have two 16s and two 12s and two 10s, but I have four 8s. And therefore, those four 8s, that tells me that my mode is going to be the 8. And then once again with the range, since they're in order from least to greatest, it makes my life much easier. So my range is going to be from the largest all the way down to the smallest number. So I have 19 minus 8, and 19 minus 8 is 11. So my range in that data set would be 11. Now, once again, those are going to be things that we review from fifth grade. It's not necessarily in this book right now, so please make sure you're writing those down, especially the mode and the range. All right, so let's look at this data set. They're giving us the boxes, so we know that in order to find the median, they have to be in order from least to greatest. That's also going to be required in order to do the mode and the range. So I start out and I start looking for my smallest number, which I can see is a 2. So I'm going to put down a 2 and cross it out of my data set. And then I have a 3 and I cross it out. And then I have a 4 and I cross it out. I don't have a 5, I do have a 6. I get rid of it. My 7, notice I'm crossing them out in my data set each and every time, so I know that I've used them. My 10, and then my 12. All right, now they are in order from least to greatest. So when I want to find the median, then I just start marking them off, one on the left and one on the right. And as I cancel them out, this is an odd set of data. So I know that my middle number is there. So my median for this particular data set is going to be 6. But once again, we want to review how we do the mode and the range as well. So which one out of that data set is there the most? Well, there isn't one, right? They're all listed at least one time, so or only one time. So that mode has to be no mode. There's no numbers that are repeated, so there's none of them that are there the most. The range, though, I can do that one because I simply, once again, take my largest number, I subtract my smallest number, and 12 minus 2, my range on this one would be 10. All right, so we're going to be doing these later on this week. So make sure that you're writing down how we do mean, median, mode, and range. All right, so what I would like you to do is I'd like you to find the three other pieces of information for this data set. So I know once again the lesson is about mean and median, finding the center of our data, but we have to be able to do mode and range as well. So we're reviewing it now, and then you will have an extra assignment in our next lesson doing the mean, median, mode, and range for groups of data. So I would like you to do this one on your own and find all three measurements. All right, so hopefully you have your answers. You've come back to check to see how you've done. And hopefully the first thing you did was put them in order from least to greatest, because in order to do median, mode, and range, I have to have them in order from least to greatest. So once again, I write down a number that I see as my lowest from the data set, and then I cross it off on the data set list, and then I make sure that I have them all. And I start out and I have an 85, so I get rid of the first 85, but I see there are two of them, so I get rid of the second one. And then in my counting order, I have an 86, so I'm going to get rid of it. And then an 88, and I get rid of it. And then an 89, but there's two of those, so I need two of them. I cross out both. And then a 90, and then a 91, and then my last one's a 98. All right, so how many pieces of data have I crossed off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How many pieces of data did I write down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I know I'm good. I have them all listed in order from least to greatest. And now I'm going to find my median. And once again, finding the median, the middle in between all the other numbers, I'm just going to cross one off on the left and one off on the right. So I go in groups of two, crossing them out until I find out that in the middle I have one number left. And so my median is simply 89. What about my mode? So on mode, you can see that it means the one that's there the most often. But when I look at this data set, I see that there are two 85s and two 89s. Does that mean that I can have two modes? Absolutely. As long as they are there the most, which is mode and most mean the same thing, and it's the same number, so they're both there two times, so I'm going to have 85 and 89 as my modes. And then range is once again just finding the distance or the difference between the largest number and the smallest number. So if I take 98 and 85 and I subtract those and I get 13. So my range, hopefully you got, is 13. Did you get the three correct answers? If you didn't, have you made corrections? Do you see why you didn't? And if you don't see, then please raise your hand and let us know so we can help you. Moving on. So now when I'm given this group of data, then I can see that I have 10 pieces of, so all of them that we've done so far have been odd numbered pieces of data, and now we have an even. So we got to know exactly what I need to do when it comes to an even number of data. So if I see my data set, we've said all along, we just find the middle number. But when it's not an odd number, that becomes a little bit more difficult. I still have to start in the same way. Have to put my data in order from least to greatest. So as I go through my data set, once again, I'm going to write it down and then mark it off from my data set. So I have a 12, a 16, I have an 18, and another 18. So I mark both of those off. A 25, then a 27, a 30, a 34, a 36, and then a 42. So how many pieces of data did I cross off? Two groups of 5 is 10. How many pieces of data did I list from least to greatest? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have them all. So now to find the middle. I start out in the same process that I had done before. I'm going to cross them off, one on the left, one on the right, in groups of 2. But as I do that, then I find out that I have 2 left. And I can't have saying, well, 0 is my median, because that wouldn't make any sense. Now, we can see, hopefully, numerically, if I was counting, that the number between 25 and 27, my median should be 26. However, let's do the math to prove it, because there is a math process if my data set is an even group of numbers. So I'm going to take my 2 middle numbers, I'm going to add them together. So 7 and 5, 2 and 2, 1, so I get 52. Then I simply divide it by 2. So we're basically averaging the 2 middle numbers from an even data set. We add them together, we divide by 2. 2 goes into 52 26 times. And that's what we said. We said counting 26 would come right between 25 and 27. So that's a logical answer that my median is going to be 26. All right, well then what about my mode and my range? So is there one that's listed there the most? Well, it looks like most of them are listed one time, but I do have 2 18s. So that's the only one that's even there double time. So my mode is 18. Easy enough. What about my range? Well, then I have to take my highest number, my lowest number, and subtract them. So if I take 42 minus 12, well, 2 and 2 is 0, and 4 and 1 is 3. So my range is 30. So the only thing difference about this number set is the median is that I have an even set of data, so I have to add the middle 2 and divide by 2. All right, so this data set is a little different because it does have decimals, so I'm going to do this one with you instead of having you do it, unless you want to go ahead and accept the challenge and do the median, mode, and range and check your work. But your first step needs to be that you put them in order from least to greatest. Now, don't get confused on decimals. Since they are whole numbers with decimals following, I look at my whole number first. Those are going to determine what is the smallest, the middle, and the biggest. Notice I have 2 that start with 1 point something. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that start with 2 point something. And then I have 1 that starts with a 3. So I know that my last one is going to be the 3.75. So what about my first one? It's between 1.65 and 1.97, and 6 is smaller than the 9. So as I'm doing my median, putting them in order from least to greatest, I'm going to start with 1.65, followed by the 1.97. I cross both of those off, and now I start looking at my 2's. So I have a 2.4, 2.8, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.8 again. So 2.3 has to be smaller. So 2.35 will be my next piece of data. And then I have 2.4s. Now I look at my hundredths position, and 5 is smaller than the 9. So my next one in my list has to be the 2.45, followed by the 2.49. And then I have 2 that are the same. So I have 2.87 and 2.87. And then as we said, our last number that's going to be left is my 3, so 3.75 goes at the end. I had 8 pieces of data. Did I list 8 pieces of data from least to greatest? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did, so I have them all. Now we're going to go and figure out what the median is. And once again, crossing in groups of 2 from left to right until I get to the center. And I have an even number. So some of us are going to see quickly what that answer should be. So if you can see mathematically that the answer should be 2.47, good for you. And if not, good for you, because we're going to do the math either way. So if I take my 2 middle numbers, we add them together and divide by 2. So I stack 2.45 and 2.49, bring down my decimal always and forever, and then I add. I get 4.94. Then, once I know that it's 4.94, I have to divide by 2 to find the middle number between those, or the average. Raising my decimal, 2 will go into 4 2 times, and 2 will go into 9 4 times, with 1 left over, and 2 will go into 14 7 times. So my median, as we found, is 2.47, which, if you remember, that's what I said it should be. All right, so what about the mode? Are there any that are repeated? There are, the 2.87. So my mode for this data set is just 2.87. And then the range is, once again, subtracting the largest and the smallest. So in this case, I have 3.75 minus 1.65, bringing down my decimal, and I subtract. 5 and 5 is 0, and 7 and 6 is 1, and 3 and 1 is 2. So my range is 2.1. Once again, remember, we don't put zeros at the end of our decimals unless it's money. So now we're going to use these in a real life scenario. We're looking at a setup for track, and it says that the table shows Kendra's 100-meter dash times. Kendra wants to record the measure of center that describes her times as the fastest. Which measure should she use? Are we looking at the mean, which we know means the average, or the median, which we know means the middle? And why? So we're trying to compare in these real life scenarios by doing the math, which is going to make her look better for her competitions. So as I figure out both, then I have to do the math for each of them. Now, I'm going to put them in order from least to greatest because I know I'm going to need that for the median. And I find that as I'm doing those, it's much easier, to keep track as I'm doing the mean as well. So I'm going to put them in order from least to greatest. I have a 13.8 and then a 14.6 followed by a 14.7. Any other 14s? Not that I see. So then I go to 15s and I have a 15.1, and that's the only 15 that I see. Then I look at my 16s, and in my 16s, I have a 16.2 and a 16.5. So 16.2 has to come first, followed by the 16.5. Now I'm left with 17s, and I have multiple 17s. So I got to make sure that I have them all, as well as put them in order from least to greatest. So I have a 17.1, another 17.1, a 17.2, a 17.8, a 17.9. And then I'm left with her longest race as 19.5. So now that they're in order, I want to be able to find the mean and the median. So as I'm doing those, the mean once again means to average. The median means to find the middle. When I do the mean, then I have to do my math. Now, I would strongly suggest in these type of problems, you go ahead and figure out how many there are in your data set. And as we said, I have 3 rows of 4. So there are 12. And then I would use your handy dandy calculator and type those in, because writing out all of those decimals, lining up your decimals, and then finding the total, that gets a little redundant. Not that I don't think any of you can. I'm just trying to save you some steps. So as long as you have them in order from least to greatest, I know you've done the work, and then you can type them into your calculator and find the answer, which is 197.5. Then we see that that is a fraction, and fractions are always decimal, and the top number always goes inside the box. So I'm going to take my 197 5/10 and divide it by 12, always raising my decimal and then dividing. 12 goes into 19 once. 1 times 12 is 12, so I have 7 left over and bring that down. And 12 goes into 77 6 times, because 6 times 12 is 72. I have a 5 left over, and I bring my 5 down. 12 goes into 55 4 times, because 4 times 12 is 48. 5 would have been 60, and that's too much. So then when I subtract those, I have to borrow, and 15 minus 8 is 7. Bring down my 0. Now, how long am I going to go out? So when I start thinking about what I'm going to be comparing, I'm going to be comparing the mean to the median. And notice that in all of the medians, we have some similarities. If I'm comparing the mean and the median, and all of my medians are 1 decimal space, then all I need to do is go out 2 decimal spaces as I'm dividing my mean, and then I can round. So that's what we want to do, because if not, then you end up with something like this on your calculator, or then you would end up showing that it's a repeating 3, and then that gets kind of confusing when we're trying to compare the two. So we're just going to continue to divide out 1 more decimal space, which I find is 5, because that is 60. And then I can round it, because once again, I only need 1 decimal position, which is what all of the medians have. So I underline the 4. My indicator is always to the right. My rules for rounding are 0 through 4 tells me to stay the same. 5 to 9 tells me to round up. So the 4 becomes a 5. So what we found was that the mean of this data set of her races, her average, is 16.5 seconds. Now what? Well, now we got to do the median. So as we're doing the median, then I have them in order already from least to greatest. So I'm going to go and cross them off from left to right. Once again, in groups of 2, so I know that I can get to the middle of my data set. And in the middle of my data set, I have 2 numbers. So once again, I have to go through that process where I add them together and then divide by 2. So when I bring down my decimal and I add, 5 and 1 is 6, 7 and 6 is 13, carry my addition of 1, and then I have 3. So I have 33.6 divided by the 2 to find the middle number. And when I raise my decimal and divide, then 2 goes into 3 one time, gives me a remainder of 1, bring down my 3, 2 goes into 13 6 times, which gives me 12, and a remainder of 1, bring down my 6, and 2 goes into 16 8 times, with 0 remainder. So we're finding that our median is 16.8 seconds. So which one, to answer the question, is the best unit of measure to show her fastest time? Obviously, that's the mean because 16.5 is going to be a quicker time than 16.8. But am I done? No, because I have to answer why. Right? So the answer why is that it shows her time as 3/10 of a second faster. Now I have both of my answers, and now I'm good to go. All right, so your assignment is 10 questions from the book. I have reworded some of the questions, so just make sure that you follow along on the packet and do the work there so that I can give you full credit. If you have questions, please ask. If not, then use this time wisely and get it done here at school.